In order to tame the writer beast in me, I'm writing a novelized version of my traveling experiences. Killing two birds with one stone, I say. Plus, you have to treat the writer with kindness and gentleness. So this story is still in the works. It's called A Sunny Day in New York. The Korean bride swatted at her reluctant groom. "Get over here, but don't step on my wedding dress," she said while snapping her hand at him. Her accent made her words curt and crisp all the while, but she still maintained her beauty, bright beauty and loveliness. He, in his Western traditional black tux, sheepishly began to step over her peach-colored dress. Her dress skirt ballooned out in its layers upon layers of peach tulle and chiffon, and he had to squeeze past his wife's skirt and her maid of honor's matching skirt. He stuffed himself in between the two women, and his black tux formed a slim line in the midst of two peachy poofs. I was sitting on a park bench located on the circumference of the fountain garden, within earshot of this whole scene. Upon hearing the bride's sharp words, I looked up from my book and my little snooze and saw what must have been about 40 to 50 Korean wedding couples and their corresponding bridesmaids congregating together to take a group shot in front of this fountain. It was an unusually warm day in October, and it seemed like everyone was out and about in Central Park to enjoy the sunny day. The fountain wasn't on, but since all the wedding couples were wearing various shades of peach colors, and the men were in black tuxes, it formed a stunning scene that was reminiscent of the fall leaves of this beautiful day. I, however, was in a bad mood. I had just come out here in Central Park, not only because it was a nice warm day, but because I had exactly $3.14 left in my dress pocket, and being in the park is free and New Yorkers. I had to save my pittance for later in order to buy my one meal, one of those salmonella-laced chicken wrap sandwiches that you can buy from a food cart for that low of a price. You get what you pay for, and sometimes you have to take a risk, especially when you're poor and hungry. I was on my last day of vacation in New York with my so-called boyfriend. I'll call him Hank. And we were on each other's nerves the whole week we were in New York. He decided that he wanted to spend our last day here calling on his friend, and I felt thrown out of his plans. I had to do whatever he wanted because he held on to our plane tickets back to Chicago, so I agreed to separate for the day. I walked to Central Park in my new combat boots, which were a big part of the reason why I had so little money left. My new boots were so stiff, and they quickly made blisters upon blisters around the back of my ankles and underneath the ball of my right foot. So I sat on this bench to give my throbbing feet a rest and to spend some time thinking about my situation. So here come these brides to irk my condescending love sucks spirit. Instead of seeing these dresses as a colorful stroke of genius and an amazing photographic adventure for these lovely ladies to bring back as evidence to Korean moms, I saw them as decaying metaphor of the state of love that begins, lives, ends, and dies in marriage. These couples get together, almost stuck together, formalizing their lame, conventional, so-called love with wedding ceremonies and in matching outfits. How fitting of an image of the sameness, generic, robotic quality that love/marriage can represent. These wedded couples hold hands, peach and black, and not the peach and black of the brightness of the beauty of fall, but more like the decaying leaves and branches of the end of love and of individual freedoms. Side by side, these leafy couples fall, fall, fall back and forth, only to congregate into an unrecognizable heap that ends up as societal mush. Back to the present with the noisy hacking from a homeless old guy sitting at the end of my bench. Why did he have to pick my bench when there are plenty of empty benches? I looked at him with his layers of wool clothes. He took off his baseball cap and rubbed his unkempt hair. He was thoroughly enjoying the peachy girls and smiled a missing tooth grin at them. I thought to myself that even a homeless guy is enjoying his life better than I'm enjoying mine right now. Back to Hank. Hank is mostly gay with bouts of heterosexuality. The reason why we are partners is because we have been friends for several years already and made childhood vows that we would be together always. We weren't having sex, but the relationship was real. The commitment was strong. We were no-sex soulmates. We met during the beginning of the gay plague, or the AIDS epidemic. You see, back then, the virus was thought to be so virulent that you could catch it through microscopic drops of tears, sweat, spit, and other body fluids. People were nervous about being in the same room with someone who was dying of AIDS. Nurses and medical staff were dropping and abandoning AIDS patients on gurneys in the middle of hospital parking lots. Or if they were courageous enough to treat someone with AIDS, they would put layers upon layers of gloves and almost a hazmat style of uniform on. Judgmental stares and cold voices let you know what people thought of you, and you were considered a scourge on the face of society. If you were a young person who had gotten HIV by way of one of your gay, abusive lovers, wouldn't you strongly yearn for some compassion and kindness in the middle of this chaos? Wouldn't you be mad at least a little bit at the gay forefathers of the baby boom generation who went on to create a world of irresponsible, free gay sex, anything goes in the 70s that resulted in the church right saying that behavior resulted in the making of the HIV virus? Where are the forefathers now? Worse yet, could those judgy voices be right about us deserving to die? A lot of gay men found compassion and kindness in straight young women. Women like me who grew up idealistic in a post-hippie sort of way, wanting to matter to someone in a real life or death kind of way. I wanted to be seen as courageous and unafraid. For me, this romanticism was also a panacea for the rampant greed, the rigid religiosity, and the conventional ways and traditions that felt like it was spreading equally just as fast and virulent as HIV during the time. I felt disconnected from all my girlfriends who were poised to becoming suburban breeders and yuppies, and who had more in common with Phyllis Schlafly than Boy George. I mean, at least I could appreciate and relate to the kabuki styling of Boy George, whereas Phyllis Schlafly just sported helmet hair. Since AIDS was considered a plague by most of society, people returned to the church in droves so as not to be caught in God's wrathful fires of the end of days. Gay men were the devil's poster children of the beginning of the end of days, and the church taught excuses for them to be treated like the modern day lepers. My mind was made up that me and Hank were going to get married someday. We were going to create our own marriage, and in its confines, we could do anything. I thought this after I visited him in the hospital, where he was told his white blood T cell count was less than 10. I told myself that if he survives, we will get married, and society would then know that he was loved by someone, claimed by someone. He must have felt the same way in that same hospital room when he saw a big chalkboard with a poison warning sign at the foot of his bed. His nurses were wrapped in triple-layered gloves with masks covering their faces as they coldly fed him his food and then quietly left his room. He wanted to be claimed by someone, and I was the only one who loved him, since all his former lovers abandoned him. He did recover from that near miss. New drugs and cocktails were quickly created once the disease hit some straight celebrities in the mainstream. Misinformation on how to get the disease was debunked, and the gay men who survived the waves of death became spokesmen for safe, healthy living. The drugs were making their lives longer, many of them living over a decade with the virus. Some of them partnered off with other HIV-positive lovers, sharing their new lifestyle. Gay life started to resemble straight life. Couples trying to live together, possibly adopting children and making families, buying houses together, trying to find true love this time, not just sex, trying to marry each other. Hank was starting to feel this, starting to crave to see what would go on beyond the live today because tomorrow you might die mentality that a death sentence like AIDS forces you to live by. No longer was it enough for him to try not to get more out of life than immediate gratification and light loyalty. I was knocked out of my thoughts by his sudden quietness. I shaded my eyes and looked up toward the Korean brides. At that same moment, I felt this rush of feathery white cloth swirl past me. All I saw was a side glimpse of her beautiful creamy skin with her dark Asian eyes framed under her white floral wedding veil. She grabbed the side of her ivory wedding skirt, and with her other hand, she reached for her groom's hand. When he noticed her hand, he held it, and the two of them, equal, side by side, man and woman, nodded to each other in a secret agreement. They began to run together, laughing, towards the middle of where the assembled peachy Korean bridal group was ready for the official picture. They stopped and posed right in the middle, just as the official picture was snapped. The couple laughed again and ran off before the peachy couples realized what had just happened to their photo. I couldn't help but laugh too. I laughed at their boldness and their ability to be different, not only in wedding garb, but in their wedding pose. Perhaps people can be different and traditional at the same time. I couldn't wait to tell Hank about the brides and about what just happened.